him, and he had worked with the FBI, or retired now, and he worked in Minneapolis Division Legal Counsel, and you wrote this amazing whistleblower memo about 9/11 that had been ignored. By the way, this has been a while now. Anything came out of this? Anybody was responsible, or anybody was? Why was it that memo or ignored or not?
The memo led to 3 or 4 inquiries, official inquiries. Obviously, I wrote it in connection with the Joint Intelligence Committee inquiry. Then it went to the Senate Judiciary. I testified to the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. And the Inspector General of the Department of Justice took over 2 years to do their investigation. Finally came out in the summer of 2004. And it found basically that I was correct, that the FBI should have acted, the headquarters should have acted on this information about a terrorist training in Minnesota, and that then what's it called, the committee, trying to think here, the actual 9/11 commission actually found that 9/11 could have been prevented. So that was the big thing here. And you know what? That's exactly similar to the October 7th attacks that they found, actually a lot quicker than 2 years. They found that those attacks could have been prevented if the Israelis would have notified the people, etc. So it's very similar. When there's inaction or negligence on the part of official entities, there is never going to be an actual accountability where someone is held accountable. Maybe in some other more authoritarian countries that might happen. I know in like China, I think somebody had to commit suicide when they found out that they were negligent in putting something in formula. So they actually did, actually killed themselves there's more of a personal accountability in other places, but not here in the West. So nobody if you're powerful, you're almost never going to be held accountable. But so I was validated, completely validated. So in the FBI, for instance, they said that the Chechen terrorist group that was working with bin Laden was not official. And the reason for that was because they were actually assets of the United States. So they didn't want to say that they were a terrorist group. You know how we manipulate the terrorist list all the time. So the FBI puts, the official government puts people on the terrorist list that they want to attack, and then they take them off when they're using them as their own proxy forces. So this was the case with his name was Abu Khattab, and he was working with bin Laden. So they had Abu Khattab was probably an asset, and they didn't want to put him as an official. So this is always this kind of nonsense going on. And that's why our headquarters did not take this to the FISA court to get a warrant. And if they would have gotten the warrant and they would have proceeded to warn all of the flight schools, actually they should have warned the public. Then there's a good chance that at least 9/11 would have been minimized. So that's what the result was.
You were inside the system. Now you are out of the system. Now you're free. You can talk. You're involved in peace and anti-war and all of this. And but you know what you're telling me. The system will protect itself, and the individuals will just be an agent. And look what happened. What's happening now in Gaza? You have the most destructive killing machine destroying Gaza, committing a genocide, and the atrocity there for over 3 months. Over 20,000 people killed. I'm sure more people under the grounds, children and women, and livelihood, hospital, school, mosque. And you still have people in the office justifying this and giving it a coverage. And these people get reelected. And you're talking about China and democratic dictatorial system. And on those countries, we don't elect our terrorists. Here, the people who say, act in a terrorist fashion and invade country and false pretext, they get reelected. So how do you work with a system like that?
Well, here's the deal.
What's the deal?
The deal is, in a so-called democracy like the United States, we have special interests, big money, special interests, go all the way back to the Eisenhower administration, and they called out the military-industrial complex, but there's other complexes as well. And these are the profit-making things, like Big Pharma is another one, but the military-industrial media think tank complex has a lot of lobbyists, and they are profiting from all kinds of wrongdoing, including wars of aggression. We've had a succession of wars of aggression. And now, frankly, what we see in Gaza is not a war. It's very important to understand this and not call it a war. It is a genocide.
Well, according to international law, you can only wage a war against a state.
That's right.
Gaza is not a state. Gaza is an occupied territory. So either Israel intentionally or unintentionally recognize Gaza as a state by waging war against it.
That's right. Very few people understand international law or the law of war. I have a background actually in law school where I spent the summer of 1979 at the International Court of Justice at public, international, and private international law sessions at the Peace Palace. And again, this is why propaganda, our mainstream news, runs with government propaganda. Why? Because this is where their money comes from. Their money comes from the military-industrial complex, the big pharma complex, etc. And so they're always going to take the government narrative. It's very, very important that people understand that under actual international law, this is not a war. Now, you won't hear this on the news. They're calling it a war all the time. And in fact, they have not even mentioned I have not seen one single news carry the information that the South Africa and now other countries have invoked the Genocide Convention in the International Court of Justice in The Hague. I have not seen this even mentioned. And this changes everything. Because, all of our so-called organizations that were like the Holocaust Museum, and we even have the Holocaust Studies here in Minnesota. Yeah. And all of these Holocaust centers, by the way, human rights centers, they were always saying, never again, never again. And they try to train people to spot if a genocide is happening, as happened in World War II, it needs to be stopped. It can't be allowed to go to fruition where everyone is annihilated and murdered. Now, you see them quiet. You see the Holocaust Museum. You see all of them with their mouths shut. Why? Why is this happening? Why can't they're the ones who train school children to recognize the genocide. And now they are remaining quiet. The reason is the propaganda about this being a war has been successful. They permeated the airwaves. And so most people don't know any better. Now we can hope that with the South Africa, and I understand that Malaysia and Turkey have also backed up South Africa. Now we need 150 more countries. 150 countries signed or voted for a ceasefire in the United Nations. So those 150 countries, now it's the time of truth. They need to quickly back up. They can file a declaration of support for South Africa's. By the way, South Africa was brave to be the first one to start this, because power being what it is, the United States and NATO and Israel will definitely retaliate against any one single country that goes against its power. But if 150 countries now in the world back this up as genocide, first of all, how many does it take for our news to be forced to say, oh, maybe this is genocide and not an actual war? And so, I'm hoping that you can get to this tipping point. I think it's really the only hope of stopping the genocide right now. The reason is Biden administration, they gave the green light. They're complicit with the genocide right now. They've armed Israel, so they have no interest at all in finding that this is a genocide. And now even Israel is mocking the United States. Even with Israel mocking the United States and humiliating the United States internationally, I think Biden and Blinken and Sullivan are kind of stuck, because they invested in this from the start. And now they don't know what to do, because even Israel is mocking them. We're not going to follow your international law. You're claiming this. Of course, we're not going to do that. We're going to annihilate Gaza. And so now the United States hardly knows what to do. And it's hard for them to turn around. They won't sign on to South Africa's invocation. I mean, well, it would take...
Let's look at the document itself. It's very impressive. I'm looking at it here. It's almost 100 pages, well recited, well written, evidence, overwhelming, step by step. Of course, I'm not a lawyer or expert on international law. The interesting part of all of this, not a single Arab country is going to sign into this South African genocide case. And that's a tragedy in itself. What is so different about the South African genocide case against the Israelis?
What is really the most different, there's only been a couple of invocations of the Genocide Convention. I think it happened once in Serbia or Bosnia. And in any event, those other cases, those earlier cases, look at the My Lai massacre, for instance. Okay, there was no invocation of the Genocide Convention, but that's a good example. In the My Lai massacre, it was covered up for at least a year or two. And so no one on Cali and the United States didn't basically say, we're proud we've killed women and children. We're proud that we lined up 500 women and children and shot them and killed them. No one did this, because we have to kill all of the Vietnamese because they are all breeders of communism. No one said this publicly. So there was no, in other genocide cases, almost always the power keeps their mouths shut when they're doing it. Now, they don't brag about it. They don't say we have to annihilate all the women and children because the children will grow up to be terrorists. This never happens. This case is very different because the intent, the Israelis were so, I don't know, they're so off the rails that they've all gone public. And they've invoked these old passages from the Torah that said we have to kill all the women and children. I mean, so there's no the evidence of intent is so outrageously evident that this is what's different. And the South Africa Declaration has all of these examples. Not only a high-level Netanyahu, of course, but all of these other high-level Israeli officials. And they all try to outdo each other, essentially, in saying we have to turn Gaza into a parking lot and annihilate everyone, etc. So they all are bragging with each other.
Netanyahu will say that children of lights fighting the children of darkness. and
Yes.
this is a biblical. And imagine this is coming from even an outlier and Muslim leader. I mean, you talk about Islamic terrorism and ISIS and all of this, and nobody is invoking Jewish Taliban or Jewish ISIS, and all those things have done more horrible things than ISIS itself. I mean, you're talking about the Zionist ISIS is beheading a race, beheading a nation, beheading. The issue now is not promised land and territory occupation. The issue now, the Palestinians themselves, their sheer existence is a threat. Being a Palestinian is an act of terrorism. Just being a Palestinian,
Yeah.
and so it's now as genocidal act in Gaza, not just taking territory and occupation.
That's right. They say that there are no such things as innocent civilians, even including babies, even including premature babies in incubators are not innocent. That's incredible that they're saying this. And their plan for ethnic cleansing, which is to push all of the remaining, the survivors, if there are any survivors, to push them into different countries. This is all public. So yes, the intent is so obvious and so it's out there. Now, it's very difficult for the United States to maintain, like you said, some of this land of milk and honey, and the Israelis, the Jews needed a homeland, and the Exodus movie, all of this stuff that we've grown up with, this mythology. It's very difficult for the U.S. and NATO, who are backing Israel's genocide, to maintain this facade. And so we'll see what happens. But when you go back, I was going to mention something. When you mentioned the Arab countries, there is an entity called the IOC. Do you know what that stands for? It's something about Arab Committee, IOC.
Arab Organization Council. I mean, they had a couple of meetings, but nothing came out of it.
Well, the IOC, I have read that they now are supporting the South Africa invocation. So that's a big thing. Now, it's not the countries, it's not the individual countries. It's a more or less a human rights umbrella organization, the IOC. And I've read that they are now supporting this. So we'll see if we can get to a tipping point. But when you go back to why you mentioned several times Saudi Arabia, Egypt, even Jordan and these other countries, they are being threatened, absolutely threatened, both economically and with the worst retaliation. Now, the question is, does that work? Does those threats of the United States, powerful superpower, unipolar, maybe even threatening nuclear, you don't even know what they're threatening. It's pretty incredible. Do those threats actually work on the rest of the world at this point? And so, I think there's an emerging multipolar force with the BRICS countries, Russia, China, obviously Iran, Brazil. There's other countries in it. South Africa, by the way, is in the BRICS. And so if those countries think, I'm not gonna worry about these threats of us being annihilated like the Gazans. We have to stand up non-violently. By the way, filing an invocation of genocide, this is why law is the answer to war and violence. If you do not have a rule of law in the world, and obviously in a country, you have complete violent chaos. And the rest of the world has to realize now that the law has to be the answer to a world that's thrown into chaos, by the way, leading to World War III and to nuclear war. We have a choice right now. We can go to World War III, nuclear war, in this violent chaos, and we are seeing this happen now in the Mideast. We're seeing regional war with assassinations and bombings in Iran. We're seeing this start to play out with first a regional war. And this, if it's not stopped, it will lead to World War III and possibly even to nuclear war. Now, here's the answer to that. The answer is a rule of law. Even in the world, the international law is not strong law because there's little international enforcement mechanism, but there are ways that the United Nations, if they get the result from the International Court of Justice, that this would lead to an international criminal court, and it could lead to United Nations economic sanctions. All of these are not ways to counteract this chaos that we're seeing that begins with the genocide in Gaza right now. And if it's not stopped, it could even, you can see, you said populations in the world. You see populations in the world. And yes, this is going to breed more terrorism in the whole world. And so we're going to see a lot more violence. And again, there's an answer here, but I hope readers will understand and help get more countries. There are ways right now. There's a coalition, a Palestinian human rights coalition that is trying to get more countries to sign on to back up South Africa. And that's the very first step. And everyone can do this. We can write letters. We can all write letters. Here's a letter that I thought about writing today. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are the two big United States-based human rights groups. And so far, I have not seen them sign on to these other letters that 100 different Palestinian human rights. In fact, Veterans for Peace have signed on to this. And Code Pink has signed on. Other groups have signed on. National Lawyers Guild has signed on. But I don't see Amnesty or Human Rights Watch has signed on. And you know why? Probably because they think, oh, well, we're going to lose our donations. We're going to lose our donations from wealthy Americans and wealthy Zionist Americans, etc. We might lose some donations. But here's what they need to understand. They need to sign on to this, calling for the world now, 150 countries who have actually, some of which have actually called it a genocide. And actually, they need now to sign on to back up South Africa. And so I thought about writing a letter here locally.
You write a letter, you have resources and past and history and credibility. How about the average American now? Why there are so many silent? How about the anti-war movement? What's been happening now with this anti-war and peace movement in the United States?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for, I will say one thing. Some groups have emerged as being very, very forceful and strong in opposing this genocide. And, one of them is Jewish Voices for Peace, Norman Finkelstein, a lot of the Norman Solomon, a lot of the Jewish voices have emerged very forceful. They've been arrested in the Capitol. They've written, they've done everything. Now, people that are just here in the Twin Cities, we have a group of more like I meet in my church basement to sing Kumbaya with my friends. Okay, so we all know those people. And they're low information. They get their information from mainstream news. And the war propaganda works on those people. They don't understand that if they do not sign on to invoke the Genocide Convention, that we're going to get to World War III. They themselves, their children and their grandchildren are all going to be victims of this thing if it cannot be stopped. They don't understand any of that. All they know is I'm with my friends in the church basement. So there's a lot of reasons for why there could be a much more powerful opposition. And a lot of it is because the airwaves themselves, the information war is being waged very effectively. Okay, on our news right now, who is running the ads? Who has the money? If you're watching any kind of your news broadcast in the evening, you're going to see an Israeli lobby, all different names. It's not AIPAC, but they have stand with Jewish, stand against Jewish hate. They're all different names. And they're running ads on they have the money. You're talking millions and millions of dollars to run ads in the evening, basically making this seem like if you oppose the genocide in Gaza, you are a Jewish hater. You are anti-Semitic. And they're lying, by the way. One of them is the what's it called? The Israeli Defamation League, Anti-Defamation League. Okay, so they're saying that hate against Jewish whatever is up 388%. Well, most of your people we don't want to hate anyone. We want to be for peace and love. And so when someone is telling you that the issue is hating Israel and hating Jewish, then most people are going to say, "Oh, I don't want to be a part of that." Well, it's a lie, by the way. I have not heard anyone calling for a genocide of Israel. This was all made up by Elise Stefanik, was the first one, and she went viral. This was concocted. No one is doing this.
Yeah, from the river to the sea, people want to be free, not to eliminate the Jew. It's like what happened in South Africa. I know we run out of time here, but look what happened to the Harvard University president. Just an amazing first African American, first the Obama of education crap, and then she just did not follow the line. She's just criticizing Israel. Now she's been called anti-Semitic, She had to resign. This is a very powerful an institution run by a very powerful individual, and she couldn't stand the heat for an education system.
Right. She wasn't criticizing Israel at all. All she was doing was allowing Palestinian students to rally. That's all she did. And that's all that. And now the students and the Jewish Voices for Peace have been banned. Those groups have been banned, and that's what the Israel lobby wants to do. They want to ban anyone who says that, that is calling this genocide out. And so, she was actually, she went on and on. All of the presidents were saying, "Oh, we love Israel, blah, blah, blah." Elise Stefanik turned this, and then the mainstream news and the information war, they call it information war, turned it. And, unless people really pay attention and know what's going on, hopefully your show helps, and others. There's groups like Gray Zone and a lot of different, but people don't take the time. They don't listen to Norman Finkelstein. He's been going on a lot of podcasts trying to explain this. But most people don't care enough in the United States. One reason they don't care enough is they don't see how this affects themselves personally. And so if they understand that we turn the genocide, killing babies in Gaza, into a regional war, the United States is immediately sucked into the regional war that then turns us into World War III and actually now threatens nuclear war. So people have to understand that there are consequences even to ours. Here we are, we're in the most wealthy, powerful country, and we don't think anything can happen to us like is happening to the poor children in Gaza. And so, but it can. And if it's not stopped right now, if we do not have the rule of law and this hypocrisy, horrible hypocrisy of the United States and NATO supporting genocide, and for instance, Amnesty remaining silent while genocide is going on, then everything collapses.
It's amazing. Coleen Rowley, a retired FBI agent, former Minneapolis Division legal counsel, who wrote the whistleblower memo 9/11, and she thinks what happened in October 7, similar, to the failure of the Israelis authorities. Some people accusing them of allowing this to happen because now we know details that most of the people who got killed was killed by Israeli forces. They want to prevent the militants from taking hostage. So a lot of things we do not know about what happened in October 7, the same way we did not about what happened on 9/11. Thank you so much, Coleen. Enjoy rest of the day. I don't know how you're going to do it, and get over your COVID. We need you, and it's not going to go away. So we'll talk again. Thank you so much for giving us the time.
Yep, thank you too.